I'm George Nader, President of Middle East Insight, and on behalf of our organization, I'd like to welcome you to our symposium. We are indeed very privileged to have our distinguished speaker, Ambassador Muwafiq Al-Allaf, head of the Syrian delegation to the peace talks.
It's claimed George Nader organised the Power Summit late in 2015. 5 Middle East leaders were on the guest list. There was Mohammed bin Salman, then Deputy Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Zayed, the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the Crown Prince of Bahrain, Prince Salman, and King Abdullah of Jordan. Middle East Eye says Nader urged them to create a new power bloc in the Middle East to combat Turkey and Iran, and he would lobby for them in Washington. Libya was to join the group later.
The Russia investigation, we are learning that a powerful businessman with ties to both Trump's inner circle and the Middle East is now cooperating with the special counsel, Bob Mueller. The Middle East specialist is named George Nader. You see him there. During the presidential transition, he was actually in the room when Trump's team met with officials from the United Arab Emirates at Trump Tower. A meeting Team Obama did not even know about, even though it involved the head of state, Mohammed bin Zayed, the acting head of state for the UAE.
The New York Times is reporting this morning that special counsel Robert Mueller has granted the first reported case of immunity to a witness for cooperation in his probe. Citing interviews and previously undisclosed documents, the Times reports that cooperating witness George Nader worked for more than a year to cultivate Trump fundraiser Elliot Broidy, the deputy finance chairman of the RNC, to influence the White House for the rulers of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, both U.S. allies. High on the agenda was pushing the White House to remove Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, backing confrontational approaches to Iran and Qatar, and repeatedly pressing for the president to meet privately outside the White House with the leader of the UAE.
At the Trump inaugural festivities, Elliot Broidy, of course, was there. And at the inauguration, he reportedly hooked up with another Trump-connected ex-con, who the New York Times reports would go on to take frequent meetings. The New York Times reports had taken frequent meetings throughout the campaign with Donald Trump Jr. and Jared Kushner and Mike Flynn after the inauguration during the first year of the Trump administration. This guy was also reported to have spent lots of time at the Trump White House, including multiple visits to Steve Bannon's office just off the Oval. His name was George Nader. And his criminal history included multiple convictions for child pornography and child molestation in 2 countries, resulting in at least 2 prison sentences. So when Elliot Broidy, the guy who had narrowly avoided prison in the New York State bribery scheme, and George Nader, the multiply convicted child pornography and child molestation guy, when they met up at the Trump inaugural, that was clearly a match made somewhere other than heaven. Now, as for Elliot Broidy's business partner in that Qatar thing, well, as of today, he has a new and newly serious additional child pornography charge to contend with. Devlin Barrett and Rachel Weiner at the Washington Post were first to break the news today that George Nader has been indicted again on new child pornography charges stemming from an FBI search of his 3 iPhones at Dulles Airport in January of last year. These charges, we now know, have been pending against Nader for months, but apparently he's been out of the country and therefore out of the reach of U.S. federal law enforcement, despite this sealed criminal complaint against him and a sealed warrant for his arrest that were filed with the court last April. He fell back into the clutches of U.S. law enforcement today when he re-entered the country. He flew into JFK Airport in the New York City area. These types of charges are not a novel thing for George Nader. In 1985, he was charged with importing child pornography into the United States. He ultimately had that charge dismissed on a technicality. A few years later, in 1991, he was again charged with importing child pornography from overseas. In that case, he was convicted. He was given a 6-month sentence. Years later, in 2003, he was sentenced again, this time in the Czech Republic, this time not for child pornography, but for child molestation. That conviction also resulted in a prison sentence in the Czech Republic. Despite that extensive record, though, George Nader did become some kind of advisor to the government of the United Arab Emirates and the government of Saudi Arabia. And he did then attach himself like a barnacle to the Trump campaign and the Trump White House. where he really made himself one of the guys. He was apparently around a lot